1 in 5 people in the US are living with chronic pain. Most do not show any outward signs of it. In fact, most people with chronic pain remain very high functioning. This represents a challenge for marketers and, of course, generally for healthcare providers. How do you reach this group? How do you feature them in pictures and in stories? What language should you use when referring to this group? Well, my next guest is going to help us better understand chronic pain, the toll it takes, the mistakes to avoid as healthcare marketers, and that's going to be really important. Joining me today is Mara Baer. She is a chronic pain advocate, a published author, and founder of AgoHealth. We discuss the mental health toll that chronic pain causes, how patients just want to be seen and heard by their healthcare providers, and how to look at our marketing through the lens of patients. Oh, and you're going to want to stick around because you don't want to miss the point in our discussion where Mara politely but firmly corrects my very poor choice of words. Let's get to it.
Swaay.Health.
Well, Mara, welcome to the program.
Thank you. So nice to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into today's topic. We always love when people are on our show and talk about changing our perspective a little bit in marketing in order to improve overall patient experience. But before we dive in deep, Mara, maybe for the benefit of our audience, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Great. Happy to do that. So I run a healthcare policy consulting practice out of Denver, Colorado called AgoHealth, and I've been doing that for about 11 years. I have a long history of working in the healthcare policy space, and I work with all sorts of organizations in both the private and public sector to help them understand policy. And we spend a lot of time on communications and how to message appropriately to policymakers. So that's a big part of what I do. And because I have lived with chronic pain for over 10 years, I've brought my lens as a patient to my work to try to improve not just policy at the sort of senior levels of policy in federal government and state government, but also within businesses and organizations to help on the small p policy, what I would call, which includes communications, marketing, and other types of information that is needed to help people with chronic pain live better lives.
Okay. All right. So almost at the two ends of the spectrum. You got the very super high level federal and state level governments that you're trying to affect policy with, and then I'll call it micro level where you're helping organizations locally. I'm assuming like with how they address chronic pain.
Yes, and a new area of focus for me is on conducting some surveys of employers who have millions of employees that live with chronic pain that need to continue to be active and functional in their workplaces. And how do we understand that space better so that we can help people be productive at work?
So maybe we'll start there, Mara, with my first question. Like, what are we as an industry? When I say industry, I mean employers, I mean providers, I mean vendors. What are we, what assumptions are we making that are incorrect about people who have chronic pain?
Well, I think, obviously, the misunderstandings around chronic pain are not intentional, right? And I think the biggest challenge we have is really two things. The first is understanding that chronic pain is not the same as acute pain. So acute pain is something that lasts 3 months or less, and usually with medical interventions can be addressed. The difference is chronic pain is much more involved and systemic and can last for months and months to years, sometimes an entire life, if not addressed appropriately, can really have a significant impact on individuals' mental health and their ability to be productive and have a healthy experience as people. And so, for example, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding that 4 to 5 people who have chronic pain are 4 to 5 times more likely to have anxiety and depression than people without chronic pain. And they're twice as likely to commit suicide. And those are significant mental health concerns that the healthcare community and people in the employer community and others need to understand in order to try and address it. So understanding that acute pain is not chronic pain and chronic pain is not acute pain, and understanding that the mental health side of pain, when it becomes chronic, is very important to understand and address and communicate about.
Okay. And I've often heard that chronic pain is one of those conditions that are hidden, right? You can't tell when someone is experiencing chronic pain or is a chronic pain sufferer because, when, they're working, they are going to the office, they're going about their lives, yet they are struggling with this behind the scenes. So it is sort of a hidden condition.
Yes. And, while we're talking here right now, I have chronic pain right now. I have it every day, all day long. I've had it for over 10 years. I've done many treatments to try to address it. And what you'll find a lot with people like myself is that we want to be high functioning. We want to live normal lives and be part of our families, communities, workplaces. And so there's a pressure that people feel to hide their condition, maybe not even disclose their condition. And there's also fear of stigma, which is not only an issue in the workplace or in communities, but also in the healthcare arena, which I know we're going to talk a little bit more about sort of how to navigate that and support people. But it's definitely something that creates pressure for individuals like myself to try and navigate, which can be very difficult and isolating.
So when it comes to, I was just going to put on a marketing lens for a moment. Is there anything that healthcare marketers can do to be more inclusive of people who have chronic pain? Like, are we doing something, for example, in our messaging, in our imagery that maybe is pushing them away? And on the reverse side, is there anything we can do to maybe welcome them more to come forward with their conditions so that perhaps they can get some treatment or at least some help with, as you said, the mental health side of things?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest issues is that, we know in marketing communications, language matters, right? And so trying to meet people where they're at with language that feels supportive and open is important. I also, in my own journey, have observed, this issue around stigma shows up in language, right? So when we're talking to patients as if they're the third person in the room or in the messaging, in the advertising or commercial or whatever it may be. And we're not acknowledging that they're the partner in their care, um, and that they sort of are on the sidelines while the clinician is treating them. This can make an individual, especially in chronic pain, feel discounted, and that leads to a lack of trust, right? So those are some issues. I think other issues are related to using language that's not confusing or oversimplifying issues, which can make people feel like they're being dismissed. So trying to acknowledge the condition and be supportive of what the individual is experiencing is very important. I often tell the story that despite having been a person living with chronic pain for over 10 years, it was um, not until much farther into my journey, maybe 8, 9 years, that I really ever had a doctor ask me, how do you feel sort of emotionally about your pain journey? And it was kind of shocking when it happened because no doctors ever said that to me. And I think that can translate into communications through advertising, marketing, and other messaging as well to help people feel seen by recognizing that this is a holistic problem that's not just affecting someone's body, it's affecting their environment, it's affecting their psychological state. When you asked about sort of more visual representations, often when you see ads about chronic pain, it's somebody at a desk holding their back or a construction worker down on the job. And it's sort of discounting the fact that many, if not most people in chronic pain are hiding and living a normal life as best they can. And so showing imagery that shows people doing their best to function versus being put down by their condition, I think can go a long way as well.
So how would we do that? I mean, because it is such a hidden condition, like how, do you have any suggestions on how, whether it's a provider or what, if it's a vendor who's trying to, do something with chronic pain, like how might you suggest they go about messaging or imagery?
Yeah, so on the messaging front, I think it's some of it's very basic things. Like earlier, I think you had mentioned chronic pain sufferers, and there's a great movement in the chronic pain community to shift it. And folks that don't live in this space don't know this, but the idea that we talk about people as the person with the lived experience of chronic pain versus identifying them as their condition can go a long way for people to feel I'm a human beyond my condition. And so that's a small language change that I think can have a lot of impact. Language that shows there's belief in what the person with chronic pain is saying is wrong, or what they might be feeling. Your experience is real. Your chronic pain is real. There are lots of people that get the message chronic pain is just in your head. Well, there is a brain function for pain, but we want people to understand that we believe them when they say they have chronic pain, and that we understand that their condition is real. And those are some simple, basic kind of messages, I think, around language, not blaming or um, commenting on a person's condition as a failure, because I think a lot of people with chronic pain feel like their condition is a personal failure, and we want to use language that makes them understand we don't see that. On imagery, I have a kind of shocking story that I sometimes tell, and I've written a Substack article about it. So in my physical therapy practice that I had been with for about 6 months last year, the first day I showed up to the practice, behind the desk where you check in was a sign that said torture chamber. And I think in their mind, this was funny, right? We're trying to make a joke about you come to PT to work hard, and so it's a torture chamber. Now, if you have acute pain as an athlete and you're going to the PT to rehab, you might think that's funny. But if you're someone like me or an elderly person who's lived with chronic pain for decades, going to a physical therapy's office with a torture chamber sign, when you lived in torture chamber for many years or months, is a problem. And so, that's an extreme example, but I think the imagery, should move beyond, making light or humor, of course, of something that's serious for people, but also making sure we're not using like sort of those stock photos like we were just talking about, where, it's more really aligned with an acute pain condition, and trying to show real life people working, parenting, trying to rest with their condition, and adapting, because that is a big part of this condition, and just making sure we're sensitive to all the ways that chronic pain shows up in lives and among all sorts of people, and that can go a long way.
Wow. So that's great. You pointed out something that I should have done. So it's living with chronic pain or a chronic condition, not a chronic pain sufferer, right? In
Mhm.
terms of language, just to even switch that up is helpful. If you had the ideal, Mara, if you were working, let's say, with a provider who wants to appeal because maybe they have a program to help people with chronic pain or that want to help address the mental side, the behavior, the mental side, mental health of people suffering, living with chronic pain. What would you recommend they do? What would your ideal sort of go to market, your messaging that you would recommend for someone like that?
Yeah, so I think the key here is leveraging people with lived experience
Mm.
to get their perspectives in informing messaging. And when it's done right, you will know, because patients will feel recognized and rather than marketed to, and you'll see stronger engagement and different engagement that feels more like, yes, you're saying what I've been feeling. You're acknowledging my experience. And so I think it's about recognizing the complexities when you're communicating, recognizing the complexities, that they're not magic, easy solutions, and being honest with the patient or the intended audience that lives with chronic pain, because there is no magic, simple solution. And people can see through sort of that level of dishonesty if you're promising the world, especially people like myself. Most people who live in chronic pain have seen many, many doctors. They've had many treatments, tried so many things. I mean, I've had 3 surgeries and countless interventions for my condition. And I think the honesty with the patients, that we not only we see you and we hear you and we want to see and hear you more, but that we know this is hard, and we're not promising the world. We're going to partner with you together and collaborate to find solutions that work for you. And I think when the healthcare system engages with patients more and more as partner, you get much farther, especially in this space, because patients are the experts on their conditions, especially when it comes to something like chronic pain that can last a very long time and have deep effects. I had a practitioner maybe about a year ago, who I was seeing for some possible new interventions, who, after taking sort of the intake, he asked me, "Well, what do you think is going on with you?" And it was like, I was taken aback because I'd never had a doctor say that to me. But it was meaningful because I was able to share that I felt there was more than one thing going on, and that there were a couple different compounding variables that were creating my ongoing challenge. And he said, "You know what? I agree with you." And to have a doctor say that to the patient was like really meaningful, and I gained trust in him as a result of that. And it's just needs to be such a big part of a mind shift in this space.
For someone who's listening to this who may be living with chronic pain, like, and for those of us who aren't, who are looking for resources to maybe get better at this and understand this more, are there any sort of trusted resources that you turn to, Mara, or that you would recommend for people to go to?
Yes, there's a few. I think, on the sort of advocacy and patient support side, and learning how to communicate with patients and those you're marketing to, what have you, I think the US Pain Foundation, the National Pain Advocacy Center, I'm actually on their policy and science advisory board, and the American Chronic Pain Association, all have strong patient voices, good storytelling, practical tools, support groups, things of that nature. So those would be some of my top recommended. I think for sort of more the research and kind of understanding the bigger picture, and maybe more of a global perspective, is the International Association for the Study of Pain, which does foundational development of definitions and supporting of research to address the complexities in this field. And so those would be some of the priorities. But then again, as I said earlier, honestly, patients are a great resource. There are so many online communities of people with lived experience, that are often ahead of formal systems on these issues. And I, for example, started a Facebook group. It's a close support group, so you'd have to submit a request to join, but it's called Chronic Pain Chats. And I write about this issue also at Substack, where you have a lot of community folks who live in this space communicating about it. So I think there's a lot of more informal resources out there as well to help people understand better and meet the needs.
And so
Yes.
that'll be my final question for you, Mara. Like, if we were to tell the story of someone living with chronic pain, um, as part of maybe a marketing campaign, or even not, just to tell that story, so to recognize that, this is what's happening out there. How would you recommend we approach that story? Obviously, get permission. That's the first thing and foremost. But how would you suggest someone approach telling a story of someone with the lived experience of chronic pain?
So I think, obviously, in addition to the consent to participate, as you mentioned, is making sure it feels like a full collaboration, and the patient should feel like a co-creator, right? Not just the subject of this. Obviously, the language and how language is used important. I think letting the individuals you're leveraging who have the experience, the personal experience, define what matters in the story to them, not just focusing on clinical milestones, but accounting for the fact that, the chronic pain experience is a whole person experience, and making sure to leverage all the components of that experience would be important. And I think back to what we were talking about earlier with honesty, so you can build trust, is trying to avoid turning it into, the magical before and after narrative. I mean, there are stories out there of people who can be healed from chronic pain, and there are interventions that work for some people to, change the course completely, but we also don't want people to feel misguided by that. And so making sure that you're including the emotional and relational impacts and honesty around the story, I think with all its, challenges, is going to resonate the most and help build trust in what you do.
Last question for you, Mara. Where can people go to connect with you?
Oh yeah. Thanks for asking. So I am on LinkedIn. You just find me Mara Baer on LinkedIn. My company is called AgoHealth. I do have a website that you can find. I also have an Instagram called Chronic Pain Chats, and a Substack called Chronic Pain Chats, and a Facebook called Chronic Pain Chats. So you can find me in many places talking about chronic pain and how we address the need at all different levels of engagement. So those are the best places to seek me out.
Well, Mara, you've shared all amazing information with us. Thank you for enlightening me on this area of healthcare and correcting my language. And it's been great to have you on the program.
Yes, well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks again for having me.
I absolutely love speaking with patient advocates. Their passion, their knowledge, their dedication to the cause, it's refreshing. And I love how firm Mara was when she corrected my terminology. I said chronic pain sufferers, and it should have been those living with chronic pain. I also loved Mara's comments about the pictures that we use when appealing to or trying to depict people with chronic pain. How we kind of default to pictures of people actually experiencing acute pain, and the two are not the same. This conversation with Mara just proves again how important it is to get people with lived experience involved early in the design of our marketing initiatives. That way you avoid all of those mistakes that she mentioned in our discussion. And hey, if you made it this far in the video, we would really appreciate it if you mash that like button and click subscribe. Also, head over to Swaay.Health, that's Swaay with 2 A's, .health, where you will find more great content like this. I'm Colin Hung, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.